Boa tarde. Antes que tudo, peço desculpas, mas meu português só dá para pedir uma cerveja. Entonces podría presentar en inglés. First of all, I wanted to thank Rosandro and R2 Valor Público for making this possible. I think this is one of the few conferences that manages to speak from producer to the actual community. Usually you have only investors or you have a lot of analysts, so closer. Okay. So it's a brilliant event. So thank you so much for the invitation, for the opportunity to be here, and congratulations on a fantastic event. So first of all, I think today you are all experts of what has happened in the last few years in terms of the market. My colleagues before me presented very well of the main drivers of supply and demand and what made prices as they are today happen. I just wanted to discuss something that probably we haven't spoken a lot today, and that's the terms of inventories. Probably you have heard today and before about ESS, EVs, and what is driving that battery demand and industrial demand and for lithium. But as a result of a increasing demand, particularly from ESS, this resulted in a drawdown on inventories, particularly in China, but elsewhere in the world. And when you have or you eroded that inventory level, you depend more on the spot market, and people are bidding higher to get that spodumene and lithium chemicals in order to continue the lithium supply chain. And it's interesting to understand that 1 year ago, exactly today, 1 year ago, the lithium carbonate price was at $8,000 per ton. Today we're in 21,000. 1 year ago, spodumene concentrate prices at 6% were roughly $600, $610 per spodumene concentrate. Today we're more than 2,200. That's a dramatic increase in prices. And usually there's a certain degree of seasonality in prices. Usually Q3 and Q4 are stronger. And then we have usually an addition to the recovery on the inventory level in Q1 when there's lower industrial activity, particularly in China, because there's a Lunar New Year and factories usually stop for some time. And that's where inventories are supposed to go up. This year, that didn't happen. Actually, industry index in China or industrial activity in China continued quite high. So inventories continue depleting, and that depletion is continuing until today. One thing, I appreciate the chart is a bit small, but one important trend that we've seen in the market lately is a disconnect between the spodumene market and the lithium chemicals market. And that's something that Vinicius asked us before. This is something that hasn't happened historically for long term, and now we're in that process. So historically, the ratio between spodumene or lithium carbonate to lithium or to spodumene concentrate sits between 12 to 13. That means 1 ton of carbonate costs 13 times more than spodumene. Today, and from 2025, that has lowered to, now it's between 9 and 10, and we are expecting that to continue in the next few years. What that means? It means that the pricing is favoring spodumene concentrate over lithium chemicals. And that's something, again, that Vinicius mentioned. Why is this happening? And I think yesterday Adam Fan mentioned about China has everything, right? So as you may know, China is the industrial hub and the refining hub for most of the lithium spodumene. That means most of the spodumene gets refined in China. In order to maintain the refineries going, we need to feed them with spodumene concentrate. And I think today we've heard a lot about what happened in Zimbabwe, what is happening in Mali as well, in Brazil as well. So that tightness is still in the market, and it's feeding or it's improving the conditions for the market conditions for spodumene concentrate. And that, of course, favors Brazil. this is a bit of a repetition of what we heard the whole day, but we are still forecasting a massive increase in lithium demand. This is mainly driven by battery demand, ESS, EVs, as we discussed. And we consider that by next year, or this year compared to last year, we will need around 280,000 tons of extra material. Just to put as a reference, that's 8 sigma lithiums. So we need, this year we needed to build 8 sigma lithium to only sustain that increase from last year. And next year we're forecasting roughly a 200,000 tons increase, 6 sigma lithium. And that is happening every year. And if we take a look at long term, we are forecasting more than 7% growth in the 15 years ahead. That's massive. If we consider almost any other commodity in the market, this kind of growth, if we compare it to copper, for example, copper grows at 3 to 5%. 7% gives a lot of opportunity to the lithium market, and we believe that will be sustained on a long term. And as well to mention, even if the next few years we're expecting a relatively balanced market where we might be in deficit as we think we are today, or oversupply us in the next few years, we are expecting that over a longer period of time, demand will surpass, the rhythm that demand is growing will surpass that of supply. And that will likely create some issues. It's either prices or demand destructions. We will see in a few years. Not long ago, Benchmark launched a forward pricing. And this is mainly a poll between the market participants to try to understand the sentiment, where the market participants think prices will be in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And what we've seen since the beginning of the year is a certain degree of optimism still in the market. Most of the market participants we've asked, they think prices will increase considerably in the next 12 months. And that tells us something about the market. That tightness that previously were discussed, we still expect it to continue in the next few months. But longer term, something that sometimes we miss, in the last few decades, China has been investing heavily in different regions. Argentina is one, but mainly in Africa. And sometimes it's a very opaque region. We don't know, we don't have a lot of visibility of what's happening. But trade data, satellite imagery, they tell a story of how capacity is being built rapidly in Africa, with Chinese capitals. We believe the increase in production from Australia, from Africa, will tilt the market into an oversupply market from next year and in 2028, as we can see on the chart. But even though lithium is a very volatile market, it's still a commodity, or some participants will call it a commodity, but still react as the rest of the mining industry. Usually after increase in prices, we see an increase in investment in the region. And that's what we are forecasting. We are forecasting roughly, this is the amount of billion of dollars every year that will be put into new mines and refineries across the world. And South America is one of the main recipients of these funds that will be starting to hit the ground in the next few years. Now, there's a lot of production and a lot of capacity being built in North America. Probably you heard of Thacker Pass, of a lot of DLE assets being built there. And usually North America is a very capital-hungry, capital-intensive country. It costs much more to build a mine in North America than it does in Brazil or South America. And that is something that for now, because of the strategy of Project Bolt and the national strategy in North America, there will be a lot of focus on new lithium mines. But South America keeps being one of the main recipients of funds. And we are talking about $5 billion from 2027, 2028, 2029. Each year, $5 billion. That's a lot of money flowing into the market. And that's only to develop the assets that we know of at the moment. Longer term, things can improve, of course. And I just wanted to discuss about the Brazilian reality at the moment. And Brazil has very unique characteristics and benefits that makes it very attractive to investment, even though this year we've seen some delays in terms of investment. But there's a lot of, and sadly I didn't incorporate the comparison against brine assets. But the reality is that Brazil, in blue, it's very competitive globally. So we are talking about the first half of the cost curve. That and what we see, the high quality of the assets, the scalability, and also the strategic relationships. Because Brazil can sell both to China, can sell to North America, can sell to Europe, and this is a very unique opportunity. I discussed about Africa lately, and the reality is Africa is mostly tied with China. Brazil is not, and that's a huge benefit when, particularly when we are expecting North America and Europe to develop their supply chains. But if we look at 10 years in the future, and I know there's a lot of representatives in in this room about developing different projects in Brazil, we are estimating in times all these Brazilian assets, we're talking about Bandeira, Bahia Grande, etc., will be within that box. So that means still with the different the problems or different bottlenecks in infrastructure, etc., Brazil will remain competitive long term, and that is a very important message to mention. And I think the last topic I wanted to share, and I think this is a common discussion in the market, is what's happened on the value chain, on the added value chain. A lot of companies, a lot of governments are talking about producing domestically at up to carbonate or lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide, etc. And I know CBL is doing a great job in that term. But producing lithium carbonate, lithium chemicals, is very challenging technologically, technically, and as well logistically. And when you try to get into that arena, you're competing directly with China. China has an immense benefit in terms of infrastructure, logistic, energy costs, although energy costs in Brazil are very competitive and green. But the problem as well is, apart from all these problems, is that we are depending on assets or, sorry, in variables that are not into the controls of the operation itself. For example, this year you might have heard about the acid prices. And to produce or to refine spodumene concentrate into lithium chemicals, you need quite a lot of sulfuric acid. So what we've seen in China, what we've seen in Australia, is that this impact or this increase in sulfuric acid has created huge increase in costs of producing lithium chemicals. And that, of course, chips into your market. Whatever, if you only produce spodumene concentrate, you can depend more into the dynamics of the market, while in here it adds another layer of complexity. I do think, for example, CBL is quite a unique, I would say, example globally. It's one of the few ex-China operations that can produce carbonate hydroxide. But the reality is that not a lot of other companies, hard rock companies, are trying to get into the chemicals route, except when it's considered strategic, as it might be in the US, because of all the difficulties and the lack of infrastructure, supply chain development that can create bottlenecks both in prices, costs, and the general development of the project. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for your attention.
Federico.
Hello?
Alô? Alô? Federico, em portunhol, ok? Para o pessoal aproveitar, tá?
Tudo bem.
Parabéns, excelente pontos que você abordou. Acho que cada uma das consultorias apresentou aspectos diferentes, né? E foi muito, muito interessante. Vamos falar disso aí depois. É brilhante aí a combinação das cinco, né? Cinco consultorias que vieram aqui. Federico, sobre a curva de custos, se você pudesse retornar, por favor.
No, por favor.
Foi interessantíssimo aí como você mostrou, porque eu acho que é importante dar a essa região, né, uma dimensão do potencial que é aqui. Desculpa, discordar um pouco do levantamento, eu acho que a gente está mais à esquerda em geral, tá bom? A CBL, por exemplo, isso a gente fala em entrevistas públicas, com o nosso projeto de 160 mil toneladas, o nosso cash cost, all-in, vai ser em torno de $550 CIF. Então, eu acho que a gente seria o segundo ali.
Vamos adaptar.
E Greenbushes está mais caro agora, porque piorou o grade, eles não dão mais com esse custo ali tão baixo. Acho que deu uma caminhada para a direita, Greenbushes, tá certo? E tenho certeza que os demais produtores brasileiros não tem por que ter um cash cost abaixo de $600 com os projetos implantados. Acho que é um número plenamente possível para os produtores brasileiros, então eu acho que ficaríamos todos em primeiro quartil, ok? E dá uma perspectiva para a gente, né? Muito interessante de que muita gente vai morrer primeiro se o preço cair de novo, né? Ou seja, acho que a curva de custo de espodumênio, com o passar dos anos, ficou mais inclinada, não é verdade? Ela estava mais achatada, não é verdade?
Sim.
Ou seja, novos entrantes, parece que vocês perceberam que novos entrantes vão ser mais caros, não é verdade? Ou seja, piores ativos, não é isso?
Sí, es muy cierto. Nuevos participantes van a ser de Zimbabue. Zimbabue es muy costoso. Nigeria es muy competitivo. Competitivo casi tanto como Brasil. Pero DRC, Sudáfrica, é custo mais alto que Brasil.
E os novos australianos?
Novos australianos também, sim. Pilgangura, Greenbushes é uma exceção por la Pilgangura es un problema de la recuperación, la ley de litio decreciendo. Pero Greenbushes es muy competitiva, va a ser el mejor proyecto de espodumeno del mundo, siempre. Como Salar de Atacama, el mejor proyecto de salmuera. Pero los nuevos proyectos tienen dos problemas. Uno, el capital, el costo de capital es muy alto comparado a Brasil, por supuesto. El segundo problema es la geología, la logística. Brasil tiene una característica bastante única. Todos los proyectos, los mejores proyectos de Brasil, en Valle de Ginconcoya, como la palabra pronunciación, es todo en el mismo sector. En Australia, en Nigeria, DRC, hay mucha dificultad logística. É uma vantagem competitiva.
Ok. Acho que o que você trouxe aí para todos nós aqui que estamos interessados no desenvolvimento de todos os projetos no Vale de Jequitinhonha, você deu uma perspectiva muito interessante, não é verdade?
É verdade. Eu creio que el Valle de Ginconha é uma oportunidade como bloque de crescimento. el Sigma Lithium ha puesto Araçuaí, Salinas, en el centro de atención del resto del mundo. Antes era China, Chile y Australia. Brasil es un proyecto mundial, es un país mundial para desarrollar proyectos mineiros. É uma vantagem muito competitiva, sim.
E se você puder, então, avançar para o custo de químicos, né? A nossa refinaria é muito pequena. Ela tem KPIs tão bons quanto as refinarias chinesas, KPIs operacionais e técnicos, mas, infelizmente, a escala das menores refinarias chinesas é mais de 10 vezes maior que a nossa capacidade. Então, um custo de produção que você está trazendo para a gente, né, confirmando as informações que a gente tinha, em torno de $4 por tonelada, por quilo, né? Não é verdade? Um promédio aí?
Sim, promédio.
O nosso é em torno de 8,50. A gente precisa de expandir para termos mais competitividade, entendeu? Senão a nossa viabilidade fica ameaçada, realmente.
Scusa, Australia, por ejemplo, nuestra proyección de costo de conversión de Australia es entre $7,000 y $11,000 por tonelada, muy alto. Imposible, nós hemos visto Kemerton, refinería fechando por esta razón. Es muy difícil entrar al negocio de la refinería. Voi lo sabe mais que nós, mais que nadie.
Okay. E parabéns aí pela visão do ácido sulfúrico, porque nós aqui, né, da refinaria, a gente está sofrendo com isso aí, né? Nos últimos meses, né? A guerra realmente está nos causando grandes prejuízos, já que o ácido sulfúrico ele tinha um peso no nosso OPEX, Federico, da ordem de 10%, e esse custo quadruplicou para nós que somos pequenos compradores, não é isso, Jorge? Ele quadruplicou o nosso custo, então a gente está realmente sofrendo com esse conflito, né? E hoje, inclusive, tem uma notícia que o conflito não vai ser interrompido, né? Então, realmente, para nós é péssima notícia e a gente está sofrendo aí com essa questão do ácido sulfúrico.
É uma situação muito difícil. El mensaje que yo quería comunicar era la producción de químicos es muy difícil, tiene muchas variables muy difíceis de controlar. Sí,
perfeito, concordo, nós concordamos plenamente, né? É isso aí, muito obrigado, parabéns aí.